Hello my quilting friends, Leah Day here with a new quilting basics video. Today we're going to learn all about quilt basting, and this is the process of layering your backing fabric, your quilt batting, and the quilt top together so they're nice and secure and they form a nice level surface without any pleats or puckers or excess fabric, and then pinning it or securing those layers together so they don't shift as you quilt. So as you can tell, this is a pretty important process. So let's get started learning how to do it step by step together. So the first step to basting is, of course, to prepare your fabric. You want to pre-wash, starch, and press this fabric. And I press it and starch it twice so it's nice and stiff and stable. Very minimal stretch. And that way it's going to hold fast and not shift as we're quilting. So now the next step is to tape it down. And I do use tape for small quilts like this. I have a slightly different method when I baste very big quilts. So definitely check out my workshop, Quilting a King on Your Home Machine, if you're looking for a tutorial on basting something bigger. So this is how I deal with something small, and I just tear off long pieces of, this is 2-inch wide masking tape. And I put it on and I give it just a little bit of a pull. Let me pull this one up and I can show you. So I stick it to the fabric and then I tug on it slightly as I'm pressing that down. And that ensures that the fabric is nice and flat and tight to the tabletop. And I also secure the corners. And notice that this backing is pretty significantly bigger than our quilt block, and there's a reason for that. You want to have more than enough space out here to hang on to the edges. You know, it might seem like a waste of fabric, but it's actually not. It's really helpful to have more than enough space than you need. So now I'm going to layer on a square of batting, and for this quilt I've decided to use polyester batting. It's a great choice if you want the quilt to finish nice and flat, you want your quilting designs to stand out. It washes beautifully, it has a really nice loft for bed quilts, and it also, this is a select thickness I believe, so it's nice and puffy too, so it's going to give us good stitch definition and make our quilting look beautiful as well. So I'm going to layer my batting and I'm just smoothing it out. Just spreading my hands over the surface and smoothing it out. And that way there's no wrinkles or puddles in it. And now I'm going to top it with the quilt block. Now I've already marked this block. It's already ready to go. And you can find a tutorial on marking it in another video. And I do think it's important to go on ahead and get most of the marking done. Anything that you're going to mark with a pencil, you want to go on ahead and do that before you baste it, because otherwise your pens will get in your way and stuff. So again, I'm smoothing this out, just taking my time, making sure it's nice and flat. So now let's secure these layers together. And I like to use straight pens and pen moors. So I take my straight pen, this is just a normal flower head straight pen, and I put a little bend in it. And that helps me be able to insert the pen into the quilt, press on it, and it pops up to the surface. And then I cap it with a pen moor. So basically pen moors are silicone nuggets that stick on the end of the pens and stop them from poking you. And they're self-healing, meaning that you can use these hundreds of times, and the holes that you put into them as you stick your pen with them, that heals. And so you can use them lots of times and they always hold really nice and firm and securely. Now the one thing is you do want to make sure to keep your pen moor collection away from your pets and away from your kids. I have heard of dogs eating these. These are non-toxic, so it's a-okay if they eat them, but you'll be sad because you won't have any pen moors to baste your quilts, right? So definitely watch out for that. Keep them in a bin or something with a lid on them, and you can see just how fast they work to baste the quilt. And I'm placing these about every 2 to 3 inches apart, just so that the quilt is nice and secure and those layers are not going to shift. And so this is always my first step to basting. I get the layers nice and flat and smoothed out, and then I secure them in place. I hold them together with pens and pen moors. There are a couple alternatives. You could use safety pens too, and I still have my collection of safety pens, and occasionally I'll pull them out and use them, like if I'm running low of pen moors. I'll use those. The reason that I like Penmore so much is that they're so fast and easy on your hands. As you're quilting, you're going to be taking these pins out real quick, and it's real nice to just be able to tug on that pen and remove them that fast. You know, when you're working with a safety pin, it can be a lot more time consuming and frustrating, and a lot of times I forget to remove them and they get kind of caught up around my foot. So for all of those reasons, I really enjoy working with this method. And this is just a nice general based, getting it secure so those layers are not going to shift. Now, this is what I generally do for most quilts. But if I have something that's particularly special and I really want it to be 100% secure so there's absolutely no chance of shifting, then I do one extra step. And I'll show you that next. So you can see I've moved to my sewing machine and I've put on my walking foot, and I've also installed water-soluble thread in both the top and the bobbin of the machine. And this thread is special because it completely washes out in water. And what I'm going to do is just stitch from the middle to the outer edges, and I'm going to space these lines about every 2 to 3 inches apart. And no matter what size quilt, whether this was a small block like this or a huge quilt, I would always space these 2 to 3 inches apart. And I'm using a really long stitch length. This is a 5mm stitch length, and that is allowing the stitches to be nice and big, and it's just holding the layers together. It's not actually doing any of the quilting, obviously. It's just holding those layers together temporarily, and it's allowing me to take out all of these straight pens and Penmores, and it's making sure that those layers don't shift at all during the quilting process. Now, as I said before, this is an extra step, and you can see it's a lot of, breaking thread. You don't have to hide these thread tails or anything like that. They are water soluble. It's going to wash out completely. But even still, it is an extra step, and it does take more time. So you might be wondering, is this actually necessary? Well, it's totally up to you. For me, this is a new method that I've been using since I started working on a book on walking foot quilting, and I just found that doing this extra step really made the layers nice and secure, stopped any shifting from happening, and that is really what sold me on it and why I started doing it for all of my quilts, all of my projects. Now I baste with water-soluble thread. However, I know that this is a little time consuming. Probably if it was a rush project or something that wasn't super special, I probably wouldn't bother with it. But for anything that you really want to just make sure it has just a perfect finish, it's going to layer together better, it's going to be more stable, it's going to be more secure, then I think it's absolutely worth taking the extra time. And there are alternatives to doing this on your sewing machine. It's another thing that I should point out. Many quilt stores are offering long arms that you can rent time on. And the reason that this is important is because basting on a long arm on a rail is actually much, much easier than basting on a table, because the quilt kind of feeds up onto the rail, and it's easier to smooth everything out, and you use the tension from the rail system to smooth out all of those layers together. And then all you have to do is just kind of buzz the machine back and forth with water-soluble thread, and you've got your quilt basted. So I really think that that's a method that you should investigate. If you like the idea of this, but you might not like the time, I've started basting some of my bigger quilts just by renting time on a long arm and using, again, water-soluble thread in both the top and the bobbin, and stitching these lines right across it, every 2 to 3 inches apart. And that's getting it nice and secure and stable. And then there's no pins in your way. There's no fuss with it. You don't have to constantly be stopping and getting pins out of the quilt as you quilt. So that's a few of those lines stitched. I'm just going to keep on working around, stitching lines from the center out. I do think it's important to work when you're on a home sewing machine from the center of the quilt outward, and that's just making sure that if there's any excess fabric here in the middle, that it's working its way outward towards the outer edges. Once you get all of your lines stitched with water-soluble thread, then you can place any freezer paper templates you want to use to mark the surface of the block. So here I've cut this out, and I've cut it out a little bit inside of the lines. And you can find this freezer paper template within your quilt pattern. This is in block number 1 of the machine quilting block party. So you can print this out and then cut it out a little smaller than the lines, and that way you can place it and be able to stitch within it and still be able to see these ditches. Because we want to stitch in the ditch next and be able to secure those stitches so they look really good on the front and back of the quilt. So I'm just roughly stitching this into place real quick. And of course, because it's water-soluble thread, I can just break my threads real easy. Don't have to worry about those thread tails. And that is now secure and ready to quilt. So that's it for this video. I really hope that you enjoyed learning more about quilt basting. You can pin baste your quilts and that's perfectly fine, but if you really want the layers to lock securely together, take that extra time and try machine basting as well. It doesn't take that much time and it really gets those layers securely locked together. If you enjoyed this video, definitely subscribe to my channel on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new videos coming out every day. Until next time, let's go quilt.